Yeah, let's begin then. So, in your manifesto, you said that you want to make sure that post pandemic rebuilding works for everyone. Could you expand on this a bit and tell me what concrete measures you've put in place to ensure that the SU deficit from coronavirus is navigated well?
Absolutely. So, the groups area is incredibly wide, and the activities officer remit has got even wider this year, coming with the addition of volunteering as well. So, I think we need to look at what has worked during the pandemic and what hasn't, and then kind of merge the two philosophies into how we take groups forwards. In terms of more concrete, things, I think the membership model that we've used for the pandemic seems to have been okay for the vast majority of this year when we haven't been able to get to campus. From what I've sort of heard from societies, it can't last long term. We need to return to what we had before, or at least a version very similar to what we had before, to give them the funding they need to continue their work. And I think we need to, take a long, hard look at how we interact sort of between staff and groups, and make sure that the communication is as free as it can be, and make sure that the officers are being fully open and transparent when they're making decisions and, passing comment on policy.
In your manifesto, you also spoke about reducing paperwork to lessen the burden on students. Can I ask what you meant by this as well, just to clear it up for anyone who's watching?
Yeah, so there's an awful lot of paperwork that's involved in running a group these days. I think some big ones that people want looking into again are the event planner. Certainly for those groups like volunteering that try to do things on a very rapid turnaround, having a 6-week lead time is a really difficult thing to contend with. There are good reasons for why these times exist and these processing times exist, but I think we need to look at what information we absolutely need and when we need it, so we can kind of cut down that time. We can give people longer to fill out these planners when they need that time, and work with them a lot more, rather than just saying, here's your event planner, come give it back to us in a couple of weeks. Much more leading them through that process. Otherwise, I think finance, mentioned further in the manifesto as well, that needs a bit of work. We moved from paper yellow forms to an app about a year and a half ago now, which sort of started to modernise that system, but I think there's still a long way to go. The credit card and purchase order requests are still on paper forms, and there's a lot of modernising that I think needs to be done to keep the system flowing for a modern groups area.
Absolutely. You mentioned, as I heard, obviously, in your manifesto and just a minute ago, about the return to pre-pandemic memberships for societies. One thing I would say about this is that it contradicts the newly elected sports officer's policy. Elizabeth Stacey had said that she wants to continue multi-sports memberships, and there is usually a similar membership style between sports and societies. So, given that Elizabeth already has the support of students on this policy, do you think that it's a mistake to have a policy that wants to revert back to old memberships?
I don't think so. I think while sports and societies have a lot of things in common, there's also a lot of differences. Sports memberships tend to be an awful lot more expensive than society memberships, starting around £30 for sports, whereas a lot of societies have free memberships, and those that do charge tend to charge somewhere between £3 and £15. I think that greater flexibility societies has always had in the way we charge for memberships is really important. It allows a lot of the recreational groups to offer free membership and getting as many members as possible, and it allows large groups like Chaos, who really need that funding from their members, to charge a £15 membership to pay for their stuff without then having to go and bid back for that funding that they would have normally had. So I agree, it is different. It's a very different approach for how sports want to run their memberships, but I think it's necessary to be different on this one.
Absolutely. You stated that you want to work with a postgraduate officer to ensure that societies are more welcoming for postgrads. I think this is a really great policy and definitely necessary because we do have a large postgrad community at the University of Bath. But I'm curious as to why you didn't include anything about this year's freshers who haven't been able to get involved with societies due to COVID.
That's a fair point. I'll be honest. A lot of the reason for that is a manifesto is 500 words long, and there's only so many things you can say. Freshers are going to be a big part in our recovery, and I think from what I've heard, there's an awful lot of pent-up demand. And if we give groups the resources to recruit and the facilities to put on wonderful events and shows and like, people will come back in droves. The longer term issue, I think, is going to be engaging postgrads, and that's really what I want to start working on alongside that, because we've kind of had very limited postgrad involvement in societies for quite a long time now. A lot of that's the time commitment, and the fact that, when you have office hours, it doesn't always line up with what groups want to do. But I think there's an awful lot more we can do to kind of align the two philosophies of postgrad life and undergrad life.
I also just wanted to clear up something about, you spoke about in your manifesto wanting to work with volunteering groups and to bring them into the activities family. What exactly do you mean by this?
So it is a very new area, and I'll be the first to admit I'm not an expert on volunteering and wouldn't pretend to be. So it's very much a taking the lead from the fantastic work that RAG and V-Team and all the volunteering groups do, and working out how they want to fit in this kind of new expanded activities family. I know they want to work a lot closer with societies to collaborate on fundraising events. I think that's great, and it's a really great opportunity we have to sort of push that forwards. But it's really about taking the lead from them, rather than trying to shoehorn them into the existing area.
In regards to the Edge, you spoke about how you wanted to banish lectures from the Edge Theatre. I'm interested in whether you've reached out to the university to find out whether this is in your remit, because obviously that is a big commitment to make in a manifesto.
It is. It is a big commitment. I think now we have control over the Edge in terms of timetabling from the SU's perspective. I think it's a lot easier than it used to be. It's definitely been a contentious issue in the past. I know the university are quite passionate about keeping some level of lecturing in the space, and I don't think we should be cutting like university involvement in that space to zero. It's really important that they can still put on functions and outreach projects in the space, but I think lectures are something they can afford to lose from there. There's a lot of space on campus, and that they can use, and the Edge Theatre really isn't a good lecture theatre. The tables are a bit rubbish. The space in there is not particularly great for learning, and I think there are far better venues if they want to lecture than the Edge Theatre.
Cool. You mentioned that you want to champion the voice of students when implementing the university art strategy. Can you tell me a bit about what this is, and also how you would raise student voices? And I'm sure there'll probably be a lot of people who are unaware about the strategy at the moment due to COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. So the university is currently working with the Students' Union to put together an art strategy, a plan for the arts going forwards. And it's really great to see that the two departments are working closely together on this. I think the key thing to remember, though, is this is going to be a very high-level policy, most likely. It's not going to go into details, and so it's going to be left for the incoming activities officer alongside the activities executive, in particular the arts liaison, to kind of work out how we want to shape student involvement and how we want to shape the arts in a real terms basis. Now, in terms of that, how we involve people, I think the arts forums that the new arts team started this year have been beneficial. It's starting to kind of build that up, and I think post-COVID we need to bring them back in person alongside society's general meetings and things like that to really get the opinions of SU groups. There's no point having ticketing systems that don't work for the groups who are putting on shows and things like that. We have to have something that puts their interests at the forefront, and I think having lots of meetings and lots of drop-in sessions is the way to achieve this.
Sustainability is a big part of your manifesto, which is really great to see. Can I ask you, if you were to change one thing about the SU in order to move towards carbon neutrality, what would it be?
I think single-use plastic is quite a big thing. The reason I didn't put it specifically in the manifesto is because the bars area has a lot of very unique requirements. I think there's places we can cut down single-use plastic in bars, but I definitely understand why, for example, with a lot of plastic cups, because we can't have people, running around happy hour with glass cups and things. So there's a balance to be struck, and I think it's about working with departments like bars to find out how they can reduce their consumption.
Okay, great, thank you. And moving on from your manifesto, I just have a few questions about the activities role itself. So, having been a Bath student and seeing others take on the activities officer role, what have you learnt from previous officers? And this could be what to do or what not to do.
I think what I've learned most is you can never force people to do something they don't want to do. There have been all sorts of policies over the years. We've had the introduction of the tier system and then the removal of it, and activities executive has been changed around an awful lot during my time here. I think the key is really to go back to that grassroots at every single opportunity. We're there, as the executive and the activities officers, we're there to support the committees, and we're there to kind of take their lead. It's not about us telling them what to do in many cases, it's about them telling us how to improve and how to develop. And that's really what I think is perhaps what has been done well in the past, and I think has also struggled in some years as well.
If you were only able to implement one thing during your time in office, what would it be?
That's a really good question. One thing, I think it would be supporting societies post-pandemic. I think that's still quite broad, so if you want me to be even more specific, I think it's probably finance, just because students don't have the most money. We don't. And the SU taking more of that financial burden, I think, would be greatly appreciated by a lot of people.
I'm sure this is probably a question that you were expecting, but you were able to run for this role during the first round of elections, so how come you didn't run then?
Yep, it's I was considering it, in all honesty. I perhaps was considering it a little bit too late. I think by the time I'd really gone, I think this is about right, it is the right year for me, because it has been an odd year, and I'm due to go on placement next year, so it was working out, what do I want to do? I knew I wanted to still be heavily involved in societies despite being on placement next year, and I was debating about the role, and at the time went, maybe not, maybe it's not right. And with this kind of second opportunity, which is it's very rare for this sort of role, that came about, I was like, no, I've got to actually put myself forward and go for it. And you never know, people might agree with my ideas, and that'd be great.
And lastly, what makes you the best candidate for this role, given that there are 8 other people running?
Absolutely. I think it's my experience. I've been here 4 years now, and I've seen an awful lot, as have many people who are getting into their kind of 4th year here. And I think it's that knowledge and experience, and the fact that I've worked with so many staff from across the activities office, the bars office, the former Edge office back when that was a thing, and the university as well, in planning large-scale events, be that Freshers' Weeks, be that the Vice-Chancellor's inauguration a couple of years ago, things that I've kind of seen, had a hand in, and kind of understand where the money is spent, and how we can kind of be a bit more efficient as we go forwards, and as we need to be given the deficit currently.
Okay, great. Well, that's all of my questions, so thank you very much.